Greetings. Welcome to ITR Live. I'm your host, Chris Hagenow. We are back here in the Hendrickson Library at the Center for the Preservation of Western Civilization at ITR World Headquarters in Central Iowa. Today, we have joining us virtually Sarah Curry. So you functionally are in studio here today, and happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
This is it is. This is your first time back on the podcast since your extended absence, and we told folks you were leaving, you left, and now you're back, and all is well with the world, right?
I am back. Yes.
Okay.
Things are good.
All right. Good. Usually we have a lot to talk about whenever you're on the show, but today we are going to go over the ITR Local Government Symposium that we held. Was that last week already?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we're a little late to this on the show, but we are definitely going to talk about it today. I do want to make sure, because I told the folks I would remind them every time we have an episode that they need to be aware, and you aren't in the loop on this yet necessarily, Sarah, but our campaign for Amendment 1 that's on the ballot this year. So it is Amendment 1, which is maketaxhikesharder.com, which is the 2/3 amendment. So it would require the legislature to have 2/3 amendment anytime they want to raise taxes. We are doing that here. I want to make sure every time I get a chance that I'm talking about it and people know about it. Can I get you on record of where you're at on the ballot question we have this fall? I'm going to put you on the spot, Sarah.
I mean, that's really good policy, and that's the way it needs to be. So yeah, we've got to support that.
Great. Well, I'm glad we got you on board. I think you and John, now that's 2, so we're on our way to a win. But no, we're going to have a big campaign, do all the things that people expect out of a big campaign. You're seeing a lot more out of it coming into the summer and the fall. So I'm excited about that. We've got a lot of good coverage off of that early, and we are only getting started. So Local Government Symposium, Sarah. What is the ITR? What is the ITR Local Government Symposium?
Well, it's a time where local government officials, so mainly city, county, and school board members, can get together and kind of share thoughts with similar-minded folks that want to advocate on behalf of the taxpayer, and that's why they chose to run for public office, but also to share with them just some really great information to help them do their job. A lot of us will go to our city council meetings or our school board meetings and we'll argue and yell at them and tell them to do better, but at some point, we have to teach them how to do better or show them where the resources are so they can make good decisions. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I think it was really positive. It was our second year doing it. A lot more people showed up and participated. And all the feedback I got was really, really positive that people enjoyed it.
I got a lot of good feedback, too, about it. And I think that I continue to be encouraged that there's a lot of folks across the state of Iowa that want this kind of information. And it's tough. These aren't full-time elected officials that are coming to Des Moines. I mean, these are folks that have jobs and families and everything. Yeah. And coming from, sometimes considerable distance away to do this, so they care. I think the premise that I come back to, because my mindset is that of state legislature, right? That's kind of the world that I've lived in for most of my life. There's a lot of resources at the legislature. If you are a state legislator, you've got your own caucus staff, you've got the Legislative Services Agency, you've got everybody that's in the lobby on any particular issue, and that's not a bad thing. There's just a lot of subject matter expertise. You've got groups like, some of the at least nominally nonpartisan ones like NCSL that have resources there compared. And then you've got more ideologically driven groups like ALEC or, there's some on the left too, that in all these different entities that are there. And yes, I think they come at a viewpoint, but they're also just a ton of resources. And that's even at the state legislative level. That doesn't exist at the local level in Iowa outside of the League of Cities or the Iowa Association of Counties. And they have a lot of good stuff for folks there. And I don't want to diminish that, but it's just one entity. And there's sometimes some ideas that don't get presented there. And so we're trying to provide at least some kind of alternative to that. And that's where I think a lot of people are really responding well to this. Is that fair what I'm
Yeah, it's really fair. So a lot of folks don't know there's actually a national association of counties and a
Yes.
national like league of cities. And so every state has their own local, I guess you could put it, counties association and cities association and even school boards association. But a lot of them are just taking those narratives and those big policy ideas from the national group and then trying to apply them to the state. Where us at ITR, like we are Iowa, like we don't have a bigger national message. We are just doing what we think is best for Iowans and taxpayers. So you're right. I think the message is much more targeted and it's much more Iowa centric. And even though we did bring in some national experts, those national experts can speak to how Iowa's doing it different from other states and why that's a good path forward.
Right.
So yeah, just I think that lens of being so focused, hyper focused on the local is why people want to come to our event instead of those big national events or even statewide events.
Right. Well, one of the things too that from the national speakers that comes through for me and folks really talking about is what is the role, the proper role of a city or proper role of a county or a school board in government. And that's not necessarily a unique to Iowa thing. I mean, the proper role of a city is the same in Nebraska as it is in Iowa. They may do more or less things or have different tax structures or their relationship with the state may be different. But that core philosophical idea, that's consistent across the board, maybe with some nuance, but a national speaker can speak very well to those things.
Well, and I really liked what he said. So we had Mark Moses, who has over 30 years of experience in municipal government finance and management, and he's written a book on the topic. I find it really exciting. Some of our listeners might help put them to sleep, but
no one out there listening to the episode needs to try to get to a point where they're more excited about this than you are. That's not the yardstick by which our listener interest is going to be measured.
I love spreadsheets.
Okay.
But it was really interesting because he put it, and I think this is where good intentions get really mixed up with the function of government, right? We talk about cities, and I'm going to use a great example, like the city nearby, Council Bluffs, which is where I go for a lot of my shopping and stuff. What is the function of that city? It's not to keep up with Omaha. It's not to build, they want to build the rail car like Omaha's doing, or the mayor wanted to create this entire like homeless task force. It's not that those are bad ideas, but what is the function of a city? It's really focusing on police, fire, roads, those types of things. Like there are nonprofits out there that are really, really good at what they do. And they can adjust to the environment much quicker than government can. And homelessness is a really big topic right now. Everyone's talking about it. But that takes a very nimble, responsive organization. And we all know government doesn't move fast and they're not really responsive the way that the private sector is. And so allowing some of those jobs or issues to be handled by nonprofits or the private sector is better for the taxpayer and also better for the people receiving those services. And I'm not just picking on homelessness. It's just that tends to be an issue in Council Bluffs. It's anywhere, right? Des Moines could probably farm out some of their responsibilities to nonprofits and save taxpayer dollars. And so I really enjoyed that discussion because I think it speaks to every city.
Two things that come to mind on that, and we can kind of geek out on this, but and that tension point between government versus the free market, I always come back to the free market is the most efficient vehicle to allocate scarce resources that the world has ever seen. Government will never be able to allocate those resources as effectively. And I think even in progressive economic theory, I think they would agree with that. I mean, things like, you get a lower multiplier effect and all those kinds of things. However, so I just, even if it's not, I mean, you can make the argument it's just about getting more services to more people if you want to come at it from that angle. The other thing too, though, and I don't even know if we talked about this in the symposium as much, Sarah, but I'm kind of losing my train of thought a little bit. Is not just necessarily whether it should be a city or a nonprofit, but whether it should be, and this is kind of one of my things we fought, again, going back to putting my legislative hat on, but it's between the local government and the state.
There's that too.
And the one that comes to mind right now was the universal basic income argument that we had. So whatever you think of universal basic income, of providing some sort of just cash benefit in lieu of traditional entitlements, but that's not the function of a city. There's just no way. That is a state or a federal issue. Now, I have strong feelings about those even at the state or the federal level, but that's not a state. That's not a city function. And they just shouldn't be in those spaces at all.
Well, and you bring up a really great point, right? Like philosophically, you and I don't agree with universal basic income. That's just our philosophical beliefs. But there might be some people out there that do believe in that. And that's fine, but the core discussion is not whether it's good or bad. It's what is the function of a city? What is the function of a school district? And is it in their role to do that? You know, we talked about it with school districts too. During COVID, school districts started trying to become these community centers and offering all of these services that none of it pointed back to actually educating students. And at the core, right, school districts are supposed to educate our students. And so I think it's really looking at things through that lens. It's not that it's a bad idea, and it's not that it's right or wrong. It's what is the function of your level of government, and is it within your scope to do those things? And I think that's a really good reminder for local elected officials. I mean, state officials probably need that reminder too, but you're exactly right.
You can't do everything. And there's a lot of things that might sound good that aren't the role of government at all, or aren't the role of your government or your level of government. And you have to say no to things. And that doesn't make you bad or uncaring or it's not a dereliction of duty. In fact, it's probably the more responsible part of governing, is saying we can't do that. We have these services over here, these things that we are tasked with. We have to do them as great as we can. We have to have police and fire protection. We have to have water. We have to have, make sure that the utility, like those things are really the should be the focus, and not some of the side issues, let's call them. But and chief among them that we've been talking about lately is some of the economic development and grants and handouts. Those are not a core function of government. Cities get involved in them all the time, but it is not the core mission to interject government into economic development.
I do want to say something on that, because I'm going to geek out.
I know, I'm going to get you going.
I've been reading all these articles, about how cities are reacting to the property tax legislation. And I love it because these mayors are coming out and they're saying, we have to stop giving out property tax abatements because we have to focus on our essential services. And I'm like, yes, that's the whole point, right? That's what you're supposed to be doing in the first place.
Nature is healing.
So, I mean, people might be mad about the property tax bill, but it's doing what it's supposed to do. And so I hope events like this are helping guide people to kind of vocalize that. And I think pivoting to the next speaker we had.
Yeah, please do.
She talked about communicating these issues with your base and kind of campaigning and how to keep communication up with your citizens and don't get into a bunch of arguments on Facebook, like, how to make the best use of your time and really get your message out there and connect with your voters. And I thought that was really helpful because sometimes, we get elected and then we get so hyper-focused in our little local government bubble and we forget that there's people out there that are, running the kids to school and doing their jobs, and they forget about it.
No, I think that's right. You've heard me go on before. I've got all kinds of thoughts on it. The idea of communication is hard. It's hard for, frankly, at any level, whether you're running for president down to township trustee, like how you message yourself in a campaign and as an elected is, well, there's a wide range of it, and there's a wide range of results on it too. I mean, you've got all the way from somebody like President Trump, who's completely unique in that regard and how he messages himself, and other people that do nothing. They get elected because almost by default and don't communicate anything. And I'm there's all kinds of different things. The one thing I see though is I see candidates and campaigns that get stuck in the mud in their social media, and they get lost in the argument. Somebody said something mean about me or that wasn't true, and so I'm going to run off to social media to try and clear the air, and it ends up into this, sort of flame war. None of that ever helps you get elected.
No.
And what I really try and encourage people is use your channels to talk about you and what you're going to do, what you have done, what's coming up, and just state. And look, the comments are always going to be a cesspool. If you're doing your job, if you are active in the job and doing things, you're going to have people that are going to say negative things about you. And if you're not ready for that, and if you're not willing to have the thick skin on that, you might want to rethink, some of the premises of whether you're should be involved or not.
And one thing that I heard that really resonated with me, so I was just on maternity leave. And I'll tell you, when you have a new baby at home, you don't really care what the government's doing because you're taking care of kids and all that. So it really spoke to me about how important it is to reach out to people. And our speaker talked about local endorsements. Yep. And so you might think getting the local banker or the local farmer or someone to endorse you is small potatoes. But I'll tell you, like, as a mom on maternity leave, when I talk to someone in the grocery store, like, that almost helps, right? Because I'm not following all of the social media and all of the news, but I'm like, oh, so-and-so that I see all the time at the farmer's market or at school drop-off, they like this guy, well, then I'll probably like him and I'll vote for him. And so it just reminded me, I guess, again, we get kind of in our bubble, too, at work where, everything's about Iowa public policy, right? And when you step away, you're like, oh, 90% of the people don't really care. How do we reach those people? How do we educate those people? And that local endorsement piece, I think, is more important than a lot of candidates realize.
I would put my own spin on that, too. I think there's something there. If all that endorsement is I'm going to do my one piece of mail and I'm going to put their name along with 10 others on the piece of mail and flood somebody's mailbox, I don't think it's going to have the intended effect. But if you can get that person to put something on their own social media, if that person is willing to go out and say something publicly in the community on your behalf, or even just so much as putting a sign in their yard. In some of these small towns, everybody knows where, Joe, the banker, lives, right? And you see the sign in his yard, and that matters. So yard signs don't vote. But I think that it's what you do with the endorsement that can matter as much as getting the endorsement. You made a good point. This is, the other thing that it matters is that it's just door knocking that I've always pushed. To your point about young kids at home, I think I've told this story before. In my first campaign back in 2008, it was really close, and it was one of the closest in the state. I think in the end it was 90 some votes was the margin. But I remember and we were on TV the whole bit. A weekend before, it was like maybe Thursday before the election. 1 PM, I'm door knocking in West Des Moines. And I walk up to this door, there's toys out in the yard, there's, dolls sitting on the front porch. You could just tell the front door's open, and you can just tell that, they're having a day, right? And I go up and I have my walk sheet, and it's, an independent voter who's a woman, and I don't remember, probably 30-ish, right? And I go to the door and I ring the doorbell, and it takes a couple minutes. She comes to the door. She's got a kid under one arm, another one running in the background. And I said, hey, I'm Chris Hagenow, I'm running for the legislature. She's like, yeah, I've gotten your stuff. She's like, you're like the 5th person to be here from the campaign. I'll vote for you. That was it. Like, she was busy. And look, maybe she was with me anyway. Maybe that was just her day, but who showed up? And I think there's a lesson that I took with me for a long time. Did you show up? Yeah. Because not everybody is sitting around paying attention to these things, thinking about the proper role of government, or whether you're spending money on road maintenance or, the new community center. Like, they're not having that conversation at all. So anyway, I don't know. Felt like a good point to tell that story.
No, I think you're right, because I right now am that mom, except I have more than one kid running in the background, right?
Yeah, and I understand.
Yeah. Well, something else that we talked about was kind of, again, piggybacking on all of that stuff, staying in your lane. Alan came and talked about local government legal issues and how counties maybe get a little too big for their britches, trying to take on things that they shouldn't. And so it was really interesting. And everybody always talks about the open meetings and the public comment and stuff. So it was good to kind of dive into that and get their questions answered so they can go back to their homes and make good decisions so they can avoid lawsuits.
So Alan Ostergren, who is the Alan that our listeners are familiar with, that comes on the show periodically, who is the head of the Kirkwood Institute here in Iowa, does it. And he does a really nice job of kind of weaving together like a like a case law update of what's going on at the Iowa Supreme Court, or and some legislative changes. And so it almost works even if it was a room full of lawyers, but he does a really good job of making it relevant to everybody else of what you should be doing. The open meetings, open records thing, that's always such a big thing for local governments of how to comply. If you've got we had a conversation about, if you've got a board of supervisors of 3 people, anytime 2 of them get together, that's, is that an open meeting, right? Because now you have quorum, and it's just tricky, and it isn't always, but it's a challenge.
I thought as something our listeners might be interested in, because we got a lot of questions about this from attendees. They said every time they go to a public meeting, so whether it's school, city, or county, they feel like the board has already made up their mind before they get there. And why is that? And why can't they have open discussion and bring up ideas and stuff? And Alan always brings up the point. He's like, well, you go to your supervisors or city council and you want to bring up an issue, and that's not on the agenda. And then you bring it up, and then someone says, well, that's a good idea. And someone says, well, what about this? Oh, we could do this. Well, now it becomes an agenda item, and you have to publish that 24 hours in advance, because there might be someone else in the community that cares about that issue, but it wasn't on the agenda, so they didn't show up. And so it really kind of brings home the fact that when your local board just listens to your public comment and they don't respond, it's not that they're being dismissive, it's that they're trying to avoid a violation of the open meetings laws, and record stuff. So I think it's important to know that if you want to talk about a subject, it's important to get on the agenda or communicate with your local officials before the meetings, because a lot of times at those meetings, they just can't have a conversation with you about it.
Yep. Okay. What else did we learn?
We learned about,
make sure I'm forgetting anything. What?
So we did, different this year. We had our city county folks do a breakout, and then school board members did a breakout. And that's just because schools are a different animal. So we learned about benchmarking, and what benchmarking is kind of
this was in the school track, right?
This was in the school track. Yeah. We learned about how to compare school districts appropriately. And so you can't take a big district like Des Moines and compare it to a tiny district like Diagonal, because different student population, different size, different demands, all those types of things. So it was interesting. He compared the Waterloo school district to the Sioux City school district. And he opened and he said, why would I compare these 2 districts? They're in different parts of the state. They're far away. They're kind of similar sizes. But the reason why he chose those 2 districts is because their student population was very similar. So when you look at the minority, when you look at the free and reduced lunch level, when you look at those types of socioeconomic dynamics, their school districts are very, very similar. So then he took it to the next level and said, okay, let's look at what's our teacher and administrator to student ratios. How much are they spending here? How much are they spending there? And so it really was eye-opening, because I think it showed our school board members, you can't necessarily compare yourself to the district next to you. If you're looking to compare yourself to districts, you have to look at similar districts on those socioeconomic things, because if you have a high IEP, which usually IEP means like special education or students that need extra assistance for one reason or another. If you have a high percentage of those students, that's going to take more of your time and more of your resources than a school district that has a low level of IEPs. And the same thing for the free and reduced lunch, which is a measure of poverty in districts. So it's important to look at those things and to appropriately criticize your school district instead of pointing fingers just because the next door neighbor's doing it different.
Not everybody can have an auditorium in their district, Sarah.
Yeah, not everyone's Waukee. You are correct.
Yeah, that's right. No, good. I think that was really good, because, sometimes I think we learned that in the first symposium we did, is they wanted a little bit more dedicated content. If you're a school board member versus a city councilman or whatever. So, no, I thought that was good. That was it. Nobody wants to talk about my presentation that I made. I'm sure.
We saved the best for last.
Yeah, no, we did not.
Just wrapped us up at the end there. Yeah.
But no, I think kind of wrapped up with a sort of a legislative update, the property tax bill, how that impacts local governments. And we've talked about that a lot here on the show, and ITR's messaged a lot of that. And I think one thing that I've talked about a little bit maybe on the show, and I wanted to impress upon the folks there, is that a lot of cities, a lot of folks, a lot of counties, they seem to want to continue to litigate this bill, this new law, of whether it's a good idea or not. And I think that misses the mark because it passed. The time for lobbying that bill is over. And now the smart energy is towards how do we integrate this? How do we move forward? And I still see a lot of, complaining or debating whether it's a good idea or not. I go back to I did a bit on Channel 8 TV here in Des Moines. I don't know, it's been a couple of months ago. It was before the bill passed, though. And, they had a city councilman and a county supervisor and me. I came on later, but, the whole section that was supposed to be a debate on property taxes from the from the city councilman was just complete complaint about what had happened in House File 718, which was 3 years prior.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a conversation about this bill or what we'll do if it passes. It was continuing to look backwards at what had already passed. And so I try to tell the folks, is like, you may not love every provision in that bill, but that's the law now, and we got to move forward. And secondly, even if there are adjustments, because there's always conversations about property taxes at the Capitol, do not expect the legislature to go in, no matter who gets elected, to go in there and back up.
No.
Like, oh, well, we did this, but that was too much, so we're going to come back. They're not going to go in there and take a vote, which effectively is going to raise property taxes. That's just not going to happen. Politically impossible. Maybe adjustments, I don't know. But if you're holding your breath for the legislature to back up on property taxes with the way look, we're heading into them running a second now in a row election that's going to be property taxes talked about front and center. So that's not going to happen either. I wanted to make sure everybody knew that from my presentation, in addition to me kind of blathering on because it's what I do.
Well, everyone loved it. Yeah, it was, no, you gave a really good talk, and I was actually really impressed with the questions that you got, because the questions that you got were extremely, I would say, educated questions. Like, they were asking very specific questions about specific taxes or specific issues in Iowa. So we had a very, very knowledgeable group at our symposium. They wanted more.
And I will say, I personally knew and have known for years several of the people that were in the room, right? People that I've known all along the way in Iowa politics, and really some very bright people, some very talented people who are doing other things in their careers besides just local government. And so, I sort of knew that some of them, but they weren't even the ones that were bringing the questions that I was necessarily hearing. But, when I go back, I've said, you've heard me say this, and we've got some really good people that are doing local government in the state of Iowa. And we've got some local governments that are doing it really well. And that was evidenced by the fact that at least a somewhat good sample of them were in the room there asking these questions. It was confirming to me that when I say that, I'm not just saying it. There really are some great people out there doing this stuff.
Yeah, and what was really comforting to me is that it grew. I mean, you and I geek out and nerd out, me probably more than you, on a lot of this stuff. But it's very comforting to know that there's other people in the state that want that same type of information and want to have those conversations and talk about it. So overall, I think it was really good. I'm excited for next year. I hope it continues to grow and we can expand our footprint and kind of get more people from all parts of the state to participate.
Well, it is a major undertaking, and we had the whole team here. You obviously did a lot with the speakers and so the vision for this, but the whole team here did a lot to make sure it's a success. It's not a completely free event for us to put on. I will say that too. So we believe in it. So yes, thank you for your work on it, but I want to make sure that for our team, as they listen to this, they understand that a lot of work was put in by everyone to make sure that it was a success, because I believe that it was. And I guess one last thing that's on my mind is this isn't the only thing that we do in local government. I mean, this is all sort of springs off of ITR local in general, of our effort to get more information to all Iowans and so they can be more informed citizens or, elected officials in general.
Yeah.
So this isn't the only thing we're doing either.
No, we're going to keep doing more. And the more feedback we get, really that helps drive us, because if you're in a local official and you say, I could really use this resource or I could use that does help frame our programming, because we want to be helpful. We want to give people the information that they need.
Yep. Well, good. That's all I got. I mean, do you want anything as a good interviewer? I'm supposed to always ask you anything else before we wrap up.
I'm just happy to be back, and I'm excited that, the property tax bill is over. So now we can start digging into really seeing how it affects local government. So you'll hear more nerdy talk from me in the future. Absolutely.
We look forward to it. Well, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. If you need more information, I'm sure we'll have more coming out at itrfoundation.org on all this, along with all of Sarah's other content. So with all that, thank you again, Sarah. We're happy to have you back and look forward to doing this again very soon. So with all that, we'll see you next time on ITR Live.